The beeping was the first thing I heard, not my alarm clock, not the sound of my coffee maker in the kitchen. The way I like to wake up to on Tuesday mornings. It was a steady, mechanical beep that had no rhythm I recognized, and for a moment I thought I was dreaming about being somewhere cold. Then I opened my eyes, white ceiling, fluorescent light, a plastic tube taped to the inside of my left arm. I had no idea how long I had been there. The last thing I actually remembered was standing in the parking lot of Fairview Community Center, reaching into my purse for my car keys after my Wednesday morning water aerobics class. I remembered feeling a strange pressure behind my sternum, the kind that makes you think you ate something too fast. I remembered sitting down on the curb because my legs felt like they had been filled with sand. I remembered a woman in a yellow jacket crouching beside me, her hand on my shoulder, her voice saying something I couldn't quite make out. And then nothing. I learned later from the nurses that a retired firefighter named Frank had kept me conscious long enough for the ambulance to arrive. I never met Frank face to face. He was gone by the time I could ask questions. But I think about him more than he probably realizes. The doctor who came in that first morning was a tall woman with reading glasses pushed up into her hair. She was kind in the way that busy people are kind, efficient, and warm at the same time. She told me I had experienced a cardiac event, not a full heart attack, she was careful to say. But serious. My heart had gone into an abnormal rhythm, and I had collapsed before it corrected itself. "You're lucky someone was right there," she told me. I nodded. I was 63 years old, recently retired from 28 years as an office manager at a civil engineering firm, and I had spent the last 4 years living alone in the house my late husband Walter and I had bought together in 1991. I was not the kind of woman who expected to be lucky. I was the kind of woman who planned carefully so that luck wasn't necessary. I asked about my son. She looked at the nurse standing near the door just briefly, and something passed between them that I was not supposed to see. "We've been trying to reach him," she said. "His name is Trevor. He is 41 years old. He lives about 2 hours away in Charlotte, where he works in corporate finance. He has a wife named Amber and 2 daughters I adore, more than I can explain. Lily, who is 8, and Poppy, who just turned 5. When Walter died 6 years ago, Trevor flew home immediately. He sat with me for 10 days. He handled the funeral home, the lawyer, the neighbors who kept bringing casseroles. In those 10 days, I thought, whatever else is complicated between us, my son will show up when it matters. I held on to that belief for 6 years. The hospital had called his cell phone, his office number, the emergency contact line at his firm. They had left voicemails. They had sent a message through the hospital's patient communication system to the email address I had listed on my intake form. Over the course of the first 36 hours, someone from the nursing station had attempted to reach my son 19 times. 19 times. He did not answer. I did not know this while it was happening. I was in and out of a medicated sleep, aware of the room around me in pieces, the sound of a cart rolling past the door, the smell of the lunch tray someone brought, and I didn't touch, the view of a gray November sky through the window beside my bed. At some point, a hospital social worker came and sat with me, a gentle man named Raymond with a soft voice and a notepad on his knee. He asked if there was anyone else they could contact. I gave him my neighbor Harriet's number. She's 81 years old and drives a 15-year-old Buick she refuses to give up, and she was at my bedside within 45 minutes of them calling her. She brought my glasses from home because she knew I couldn't read without them. She brought a cardigan because she knew hospitals are always cold. She sat in the chair beside me and held my hand and didn't say much, just let me know I wasn't alone in that room. I kept thinking Trevor would call back. On the second evening, one of the nurses, a young woman named Destiny, who had a small tattoo of a hummingbird on her wrist and checked on me more often than her shift required, told me gently that they still hadn't been able to reach my son. Her voice was careful. She was trying not to say the thing underneath what she was saying. "Has he traveled recently?" she asked. "Sometimes people are in areas with poor signal." "I don't know," I said. And that was the truth. I didn't know where Trevor was. I realized sitting in that hospital bed connected to monitors that I hadn't spoken to my son in almost 6 weeks. We had last talked on the phone briefly in early October. He had been distracted during the call. He mentioned something about a work trip. He said he would call me the following Sunday and then didn't. I had texted him twice after that. He replied once, a single line. "Things are crazy right now, Mom. Talk soon." I had not pushed. I never pushed with Trevor. Walter used to say I gave our son too much room, that I confused giving him space with letting him disappear. I thought Walter was being hard on him. Now I lay in a hospital bed with a cardiac monitor on my chest and wondered if Walter had seen something I had spent years refusing to see. I was in the hospital for 4 days total. Harriet came every day. Her daughter Carol, who I had known since she was in middle school, brought me a pair of proper pajamas and a bag of the particular shortbread cookies I like, the ones from the Scottish bakery in our neighborhood. My friend Dolores, who I met at a book club 11 years ago, came on the third afternoon and sat with me for 3 hours. She made me laugh 3 times, which I'm convinced is part of why I got better faster than expected. Trevor never came. He did not call until the morning they were preparing to discharge me. My phone buzzed on the bedside table and I saw his name on the screen and felt a complicated rush of relief and something else I didn't have a word for yet. "Mom," he said when I answered. "I just saw all the missed calls. What happened?" I told him. There was a silence on his end that I still think about. "I was in Scottsdale," he said. "Work retreat. The cell service at the resort was terrible. I had no idea." He sounded genuinely distressed. He asked questions about the diagnosis, the medications they were sending me home with, whether I needed anything. He said he was going to talk to his boss about getting back to Charlotte so he could come up and stay with me for a few days. I said that was fine. I said I understood about the cell service. I said I was feeling much better. None of those things were entirely true. I went home with a new prescription, a follow-up appointment with a cardiologist, and a list of dietary changes that made me feel briefly sorry for myself, before I decided feeling sorry for myself was a waste of time. I didn't have any more. Harriet had cleaned my kitchen while I was gone. She had also stocked my refrigerator with things she knew I actually ate, which is different from what people think you should eat when you've had a cardiac event. There was a small pot of her chicken soup on the stove. She had left a note on the counter that said, "Don't argue with me. Eat the soup. Call if you need anything. H." I sat at my kitchen table and ate the soup and did not cry, though I wanted to. Trevor called that evening to say he was going to try to come the following weekend. Something came up at work, he said. He would definitely be there by Saturday. He said to call him if anything changed with my condition. He said he loved me before he hung up. Saturday came. Trevor did not. He texted Friday night. "Mom, really sorry. Amber has a thing Saturday she needs me for. Can we do the following weekend?" I looked at the text for a long time. Then I put my phone down and went to bed. I want to be honest about something, because I'm trying to tell this the way it actually happened, and not the way that makes me look better than I was. In the weeks after I came home from the hospital, I made excuses for Trevor in my own mind, the way I had been making excuses for him for years. The work retreat really did have bad cell service. I had no way to prove otherwise. Corporate jobs are genuinely demanding. Amber has her own family and her own needs and a husband who is stretched thin. Lily and Poppy are at ages that require a lot of attention. I ran through the whole list regularly, like a woman doing inventory, making sure everything still balanced. It didn't balance. I just kept pretending it did. What finally broke through was something small, which is usually how the big realizations arrive. About 3 weeks after I got home, I was scrolling through Facebook on a slow Saturday afternoon, something I rarely do but couldn't seem to stop doing during recovery, when I wasn't supposed to push myself physically and my mind needed somewhere to go. And I saw a photograph Trevor had posted. It was from the weekend he had been supposed to come visit me. He and Amber were at some kind of outdoor food festival. She was holding a cup of something warm, laughing at the camera. He had his arm around her. Behind them there was a Ferris wheel and strings of lights and the whole beautiful, ordinary mess of people having a good time. The caption said, "Fall weekends with my favorite person. Grateful, grateful." I sat with that photograph for a long time. I am not a person who performs emotions on social media. I have never been one of those mothers who posts passive-aggressive things or makes her children feel publicly shamed. But I sat in my living room in my cardigan with my cardiac follow-up paperwork on the coffee table next to me, and I looked at that photograph and I understood, finally and completely, that Trevor had made a choice. Not several choices, one continuous choice, made over and over again in different forms for a long time. He had chosen to let the calls go unanswered. He had chosen the food festival over the visit. He had chosen the caption about gratitude without any awareness, or perhaps with full awareness that the word rang hollow against everything that had happened. A person can be busy and still call back within 36 hours when their mother is in the hospital. A person can be at a work retreat with bad cell service and still find a way to check in once a day. I know this because I know what effort looks like, and I know what its absence looks like, and I have been confusing the two for a very long time. I did not comment on the photograph. I did not call Trevor that night. I closed the app and sat quietly for a while. And then I did something I hadn't done in months. I called Harriet. She answered on the second ring, the way she always does. There is a woman at my church named Willa. She is 56 years old, so a few years younger than me, and she lost her husband to cancer 3 years ago and raised her son mostly on her own before that. And she has one of those spirits that makes you feel calmer just by being in the same room with her. We had been friendly for years, the kind of friendly where you hug at the coffee hour after service and mean it. But we had never been close in the way that Harriet and Dolores and I are close. After Walter died, Willa started sitting with me sometimes during the service. Not every week, but on the weeks when grief is heavier than usual, which do not arrive on any predictable schedule, she would appear in the pew beside me as if she had always planned to be there. She brought me a book once that she said had helped her. She texted me on Walter's birthday for 3 years in a row, just a short message, "Thinking of you today." After I came home from the hospital, Willa started calling on Sunday afternoons. We would talk for an hour, sometimes more. She had a way of asking questions that felt like she was genuinely curious rather than gathering information, and I found myself saying things to her that I hadn't said out loud to anyone. I told her about the 19 calls. I told her about the food festival photograph. I told her about Trevor's text that said, "Things are crazy right now, Mom," and the 6 weeks that passed without a real conversation. She didn't offer explanations for him. She didn't tell me I was being too hard on him, or that he probably had good reasons, or that boys are just different when it comes to emotional availability. She just listened. And when I finished, she said, "I'm sorry that happened to you. You deserved someone there." That was all. It was enough. In January, 4 months after I came home from the hospital, I had a meeting with my attorney. His name is Harold, and he has been my family's lawyer for 19 years. He knew Walter. He was at the funeral. He is one of those people who manages to be both completely professional and genuinely human at the same time, which is rarer than it should be. I had gone in originally to update some paperwork related to the house. Walter and I had done our estate planning together years earlier, and some of it needed updating now that circumstances had changed. It was practical. It was something I had been meaning to do. I walked into Harold's office with one version of my plans and walked out with another. I want to be clear about what I did and why. I did not act in anger. By January, I was not angry anymore. Anger had moved through me and settled into something quieter and clearer, something that felt less like an emotion and more like a decision. I had spent 63 years being a woman who tried to be fair, who gave people the benefit of the doubt, who loved generously and asked for very little in return. I had spent 6 years since Walter died trying to be careful not to be a burden to my son, not to need too much, not to take up space in his life that he seemed reluctant to give. I was done being careful in that particular way. I did not remove Trevor from my will entirely. I want to be honest about that too. I restructured it significantly. The portion of my estate that would go to him was substantially reduced. A meaningful portion was redirected to Lily and Poppy directly, held in trust until they are 25, so that regardless of what happens between their father and me, my granddaughters would have something from their grandmother. Another portion went to Harriet. Not a large amount, but a real one. Enough to matter because she has given me more care in the last 4 months than I could ever properly account for. A portion went to the hospital's cardiac care unit because I know firsthand what it means to have good nurses. The rest I am using to live. I booked a trip I had been thinking about for 4 years. Walter and I had always talked about going to the Pacific Northwest. We had a folder on our shared computer. He made it, the way he made folders for everything, labeled Oregon/Washington trip ideas, full of links to places he wanted to show me. Crater Lake, the Olympic Peninsula, the coast near Cannon Beach. He died before we got there. I am going in the spring. I am taking Willa, who has never been either, and who accepted the invitation with a joy that made me glad I asked. Trevor called in February. Not for any particular reason, just one of the calls he makes every few weeks now that I think he feels guilty. They are careful calls. He asks about my health, my medications, whether I'm sleeping well. He tells me about Lily's soccer and Poppy's new obsession with horses. He does not mention the hospital. He does not mention the photograph. I am pleasant. I love my son. I love him the way you love someone when you have finally stopped needing them to be different than they are. which is a quieter kind of love than the other kind, but it is still love. On the call in February, he mentioned, almost casually, that Amber had been asking about the house, whether I had thought about what I was going to do with it long term, whether I had updated any of my planning documents since Walter passed. I told him I had taken care of everything with Harold, and that all the relevant people had been notified. There was a pause. "Who's Harold?" he asked. "My attorney," I said. "You've met him. He did the paperwork after your father died." "Right," Trevor said. "Right. Okay." He changed the subject to Lily's soccer. I let him. Last week, Willa came over and we spread Oregon maps across my kitchen table and marked the places we wanted to go. We had the shortbread cookies from the Scottish bakery, the ones Harriet's daughter had brought me in the hospital. We made tea. We talked about Walter, because I can talk about him now without it pulling me under. And we talked about Willa's husband, too. And we talked about the particular freedom that comes with being a woman of a certain age who has finally decided to stop shrinking herself to fit other people's comfort. At some point, Willa looked at the map and said, "I never thought I'd get to do something like this." I knew what she meant. I felt it too. After she left, I stood at my kitchen window for a while in the early evening, watching the birds at the feeder Walter had built and hung from the oak tree 15 years ago. It is old now. The paint is faded. I keep filling it because I like the birds and because something in me cannot bear to take it down. My phone was on the counter. There were no missed calls. I thought about those 19 calls, the 19 attempts to reach my son while I lay in a hospital bed, not knowing who was coming for me. I thought about Frank, the retired firefighter, sitting beside me in a parking lot keeping me conscious. I thought about Destiny with the hummingbird tattoo checking on me more than she needed to. I thought about Harriet with my glasses and my cardigan, and her chicken soup and her note that said, "Don't argue with me." I thought about what family actually is when you strip away the assumption that blood makes it automatic. I kept my house. I kept my savings. I booked my trip. I filled the bird feeder. I decided that what I had right here was enough, and more than enough. The rest could wait. I've been sitting with the story long enough now that I can tell it without my hands shaking. That wasn't always the case. What I've come to understand, not from a book, not from anything anyone told me, but from living through it, is that the way people treat you in your worst moments is not an accident. It is the accumulated result of every small choice they made in the years leading up to that moment. Trevor didn't become someone who let 19 calls go unanswered overnight. That was built quietly, one avoided conversation at a time, one missed visit at a time, one text that said, "Talk soon," and never did. I just wasn't paying attention to what was being built. That's on me too, and I'm honest enough to say so. I spent years being the kind of mother who made things easy for my son to disappear. I told myself it was love, and part of it was, but part of it was also fear. Fear of being the difficult one. Fear of asking for too much. Fear of the conversation that would force both of us to see things we'd rather not see. I confused keeping the peace with maintaining a relationship. They are not the same thing. What Harriet did for me, showing up with my glasses and my cardigan within 45 minutes without being asked twice, that was not a small thing. She is 81 years old. She had no obligation. She came because that is who she has chosen to be, consistently, for as long as I have known her. Character is not what you announce. It is what you do when no one is watching, or when the person who needs you cannot even call to ask. Willa is the same way. She texted me on Walter's birthday for 3 years in a row. She didn't do that because it was convenient. She did it because she decided that I mattered enough to remember. Intelligence without that kind of intention is just cleverness. It doesn't keep anyone warm. When I restructured my estate with Harold, I wasn't acting out of bitterness. I was finally acting out of clarity. There is a difference between punishing someone and simply stopping the pretense that nothing has changed. I had been operating as though the relationship I hoped to have with my son was the relationship I actually had. Adjusting my plans to reflect reality was not cruel. It was honest. And honesty, I've learned, is the only foundation that holds. The trip to Oregon is booked. Willa and I leave in April. I have Walter's folder of links on my laptop, and I intend to see every place he marked. I will stand at Crater Lake and think about him, and it will hurt, and that will be fine. Grief and joy are not opposites. They travel together once you stop fighting that. I filled the bird feeder this morning. I made my tea. My phone was quiet in the way that a quiet phone can be peaceful instead of lonely. And knowing the difference between those two things took me 63 years and 4 days in a hospital bed to figure out. I don't regret the years I spent trying. I only regret waiting so long to see clearly. Some people show up, some people don't. Your job, finally, is to build your life around the ones who do.